when we just look at the global trends, that's the picture we see over my lifetime. When I was born, about half the planet's capacity was used to support humanity. Today we use 40% more than what Earth can regenerate. People would say, so what? You know, what has humanity done for me? So it's a tragedy of the common. And we would say, that's maybe a misconception. Because if you see the situation as a tragedy of the commons, where there's nothing in it for you, just for humanity, you will not act. Basically, you will see as the only possibility is to shrink humanity's footprint and to share it. But to propose that is political suicide. So you're basically caught in the dilemma between political suicide and ecological suicide. These are the choices. That's why I believe we have to turn this upside down and to transform the tragedy of the commons in what we would call the comedy of common sense. Because the comedy, invented in Italy, essentially says we don't have to produce a tragedy. There could be a good outcome. It's about reframing, that's where the humor comes from. And it's about common sense because sustainability is not that difficult. It's just different. And then he would say, yes, but the CO2 that I emit, you know, that doesn't hurt me. Where's the self-interest story? That's a lie. That's why I would like to talk about two key scenarios. The first one is one extreme, following the G20 leaders saying, let's limit climate change to 2 degrees Celsius. That's what they decided in Italy at the G20 meeting. Again, Italy, great nation. And then again in Copenhagen. If you translate the 2 degrees Celsius limit into, logically, the consequences, it would mean moving out of fossil fuel before 2050. Much before, possibly. So if that's true, it's a very short period of time, you will need the energy from some other sources. And biocapacity will become even more important. So again, biocapacity will be the currency. And the question is, how much biocapacity do you have access to? So very much self-interest story. The other extreme case would be like the Mechanical Engineering Institute of the UK says, and I think probably quite rightly so, we may not have the money to pay people to keep the oil on the ground. So we will burn everything we found. And as a result, we'll have a 1700 ppm world. And in that world, people will not trust each other anymore. You cannot rely on trade that easily. Biocapacity will be under enormous assault. And so having access to biocapacity will become even more important. So in either scenario, either extreme scenario, biocapacity will become the limiting factor. So the self-interest story is really there. If you as a country are not ready, you will have a difficult time. That's why looking at the world from the perspective of ecological creditor countries and debtor countries turns the negative sum game we're in right now into a positive sum game. You start to recognize preserving ecological assets is really key to your economic success. And that wasn't the case when I was born. Most countries had more capacity, but no longer. So that's just happening over my lifetime. Only 20% of the world population live now in countries with more capacity than what they use for their own residents. Now, what does that mean for the future? Nobody knows. We don't know the future. It's scientifically unknowable because it hasn't happened yet. But what we can do is to compare different scenarios in terms of what would that mean ecologically. So what we did is, beyond my own lifetime, we said, okay, if the most moderate United Nations scenarios came true, what would that do? And what you will see is a rapid increase of human demand. And the impact doesn't really come from the deficit every year. It's the accumulation that produces the debt. So if you see how much the area under the curve, grows, well, it's a very rapid growth of debt that may be physically impossible. So that's the context we're planning for. These are the global trends. This is the first and second point. And what it also means is that you as an individual, as a city, as a business, or as a country, you plant investments. We are building 2050 today. Are we building ourselves traps or opportunities? So it's not saying infrastructure is bad, but but we have to have the right one in order to succeed. So let me show you some country trends. 3 countries that run ecological deficits for different reasons. You can either, as a country, overcome your deficit by importing, by emitting CO2 in other countries, or by depleting your own ecological assets. The world as a whole only has the option of depleting. So what I would like to show you are a number of graphs. First for Africa, we looked at them in the morning already for you. So 24 countries that show similar shapes of declining biocapacity per person, because there are more people sharing the same country, and then the footprint, the red line, becoming constrained. 4 of these countries have assets that allow them to maintain their deficit spending for some time. They have either oil, like in the case of Algeria, gas in Egypt, coal and diamond in South Africa, or oil in Nigeria, or in Nigeria. 12 countries are already limited by their own biocapacity, and the footprint is forced downwards by lack of access, leading to quite severe conflicts. So just to repeat, 24 countries out of the 55 African countries, 4 of them have some economic access to maintain the deficit a little bit more easily. The other ones are forced downwards with severe conflicts as a consequence. Now, let me do the same exercise for Europe. Number of European countries, and then 4 of them stick out that have been in the news more recently. I don't know if you've heard of Greece. Yeah. So we have these countries, and if you look at them, each one of them had a very rapid increase of their demand over the last decades. And you think, where does that come from? How can they maintain this overspending? And they can't. So resource situations already today, even in very high income countries, have a very direct impact on economic performance. Just to look at one particular country, Kenya, that had, with biocapacity, here, to show, biocapacity has been going down much more rapidly than in global average, has started to meet their own resource demand. And they haven't been able to compensate much through trade. So as a result, they're squeezed. As a result, megafauna is disappearing very rapidly inside and outside parks in Kenya. So these are the 4 things I wanted to mention as context. The 4 new tools to keep in mind. One is, what are the global trends? Because we're swimming in the ocean of the globe. What's the trend of your boat, your country? Why is it your self-interest? And the metaphor I use is the following. If your boat has a hole, why do you negotiate with the others to say, fix your boat first before I fix my own boat? So there's a self-interest story there. And then, the last point being, once you understand that, you need to think very sharply about what's your optimum resource consumption. Because if you consume too little, you'll go hungry. If you consume too much, you put yourselves at risk. So it's your choice. What's your optimal level of resource consumption? And that's the context for our conference. Thank you very much.